Hey guys, it's Max. Welcome to our best budget bang for the buck 4K video editing build. Now, first off, if you guys are watching this video, I want to give you guys a big thank you for being patrons and supporting the channel. Because of your continued support, we're able to buy items like these and make these kind of videos that help a lot of people out. And I think with this new AMD processor coming out and all the other parts we built, this is going to be really the best 4K video editing build that you could do for the money, the best value that you can get. So before we start with the build, I want to just go over the different parts that I chose and kind of explain why I chose them. So let's start with this case, NZXT S340. It's a mid-tower case, meaning it's not too big or too small. And I got this case. I've actually wanted to do a build in it for a while. This particular color is like a matte black and red, but they have lots of different colors. This one does have a side window, and it's just a really nice all-around case. It's not too expensive, but it's not too cheap, and you really don't want to get something very inexpensive, even for a build like this where I'm really trying to reach a target price point, because the cheaper cases, they're very flimsy. They look cheap, they feel cheap, they're not sturdy, and they're really difficult to build in the way that it's designed, the channeling, the edges, you can get cuts. So I at least try to get something on the mid-level price point. So this should be a really nice case for a build like this. Next, for the power supply, we have an EVGA. It's a 750 watt 80 plus bronze. So it is kind of a mid-price range, maybe mid to low, but it is fairly energy efficient. And it also is semi-modular, so it's not fully modular. It doesn't mean not all the plugs come out, but about half of them do, so you don't have to use all of them. So if you get a cheaper power supply, you're going to have tons of extra cables that don't look good in a case like this, and it just makes it more difficult. So kind of a mid-range, not a super cheap power supply. Next, our motherboard. This is an Asus motherboard, and I just chose this because it has lots of features for the money, and still supports 64 gigs of RAM if you want to add on extra RAM later, USB Type-C. So I think it's also like kind of one of the best bang for the buck options. Not the cheapest, but we're not just going for the very cheapest build here. Of course, our CPU is our AMD Ryzen, and this is the 1700X. So from the launch, it's the mid one. There is one that's a little bit higher, but this is almost the same performance as the $500 one, and you can actually overclock it slightly and get similar performance, but it's $399. So I think this is the best bang for the buck option right here. So it's 8 cores, 16 threads. So this $399 processor, it will compete with $1,000 Intel processors, which is the whole point of this build. We're able to build something that's powerful, fast, and because of this new AMD processor that came out. Now, this one does not have a CPU cooler, so I'm using this Noctua. It's a very large CPU cooler, and this I was kind of forced to buy. It is more expensive, and my suggestion would be, by the time you're watching this video, you should be able to buy this for $20 more with a really nice, good performing stock cooler, and that's going to be the best bang for the buck, is just going for the package deal. Since I wanted to make this build as soon as this processor was available, they were not selling that combo unit, so I was forced to just buy the CPU itself with this cooler because there was not a lot of coolers on the market. So you guys are going to have a lot more options. And for each link that I have for all these parts, I'm going to have alternatives, something that I use or what I would buy if I was building this later, and also some more expensive options. So if you want to spend a little bit more money, you have the extra funds, a little bit nicer case, a little bit nicer power supply, maybe a little bit nicer motherboard, and probably the one that's $499 instead of $399 for this. So definitely check out those alternatives. Now, as far as the SSD, I chose this Crucial MX300. It's 275 gigs. It is M.2, so you guys can see how small that is, just because it's really nice to plug this into the motherboard, not have to deal with mounting something to the case, having the extra wires that you need to plug in and do wire control to make it look nice. And this is nice and fast. It's using the latest technology, so it's going to be reliable, it's going to be fast, and it comes in at a really nice price point compared to the Samsungs. If you have more money, you can get one of the Samsungs, which are the top of the line. They're a little bit faster, or they're quite a bit faster than this, but for this price point, this is what I went with. I think it's the best bang for the buck And I chose the 275 gig because that's more than enough for all my programs and a little bit of space for some small projects. All my big stuff I do on external drives, whether it's like a RAID or an external SSD. So I don't like to edit all off of one drive. But if you do, and if that's enough for you, you can go with a larger size, a 500 or 1 terabyte, even a 2 terabyte. My preference is to use external drives. So next we have the RAM. This is G.Skill Ripjaw series. Now this is 32 gigs of RAM, so each stick has 16 gigs. Now I wanted to make sure we went with that because in the future you can add another set of these and get 64 gigs total, which some programs can make use of depending on what kind of videos you're doing. 32 gigs of RAM is really the optimal for Premiere Pro and other programs like that. So that's why I went with this. G.Skill is a reputable brand, and this was just a really good price at the time when I was making this video. So we talked about the cooler already. And as far as the graphics card, this is a RX 480 8GB version. So there is a 4 gig version, but for 20-30 bucks more, I think it's worth paying that extra, and it's worth the value to have that. Most likely you're not going to use all 8 gigs, but there are times when I'm doing video editing where I am hitting a 4 gigabyte limit. So if you can, I would get an 8 gig card or at least a 6 gig for 4K video editing. For 1080p, it doesn't matter as much. But this build you guys are seeing, we're using the RX 480. Now I also bought a 1070, and I'm going to be testing these two cards and seeing if there's a big difference between them. If it's worth paying the extra $160, $180 for a 1070, then you guys saw in my final video, then I'm going to be putting the 1070 in there. If it's not, then I'm going to be having the RX 480 in my final YouTube video. So as far as the build, it doesn't really matter. We're going to do the 480 for the build. You just plug in the card and plug in the power supply. So these are the parts that we're working with. Once again, there's going to be alternatives in the video description if you want to spend more money or if I would rather buy something else at the time the video is posted. So let's go ahead and take these out of the boxes and start the build. All right, guys, so I started out with taking everything out of the boxes. You don't have to do this. You can do it step by step as you go if you prefer. But just to make it easier for me to shoot this video, we unboxed everything. Now I'm going to start off with I unscrew the two screws here. And we're going to take off the side panel. You just slide it back. I'm going to set this aside. And I took my clear little protective film off of the side panel, so I'm just going to be extra careful. You shouldn't do that until you're completely done. I just wanted to get some shots of the case before I put everything in. So taking this one off, and we'll go ahead and take off the panel on the back here as well, just the two thumb screws. So these ones here are super tight. I'm going to go ahead and use my multi-tool to loosen it up. But overall, opening up this case, it looks really nice. Definitely looks above what it costs. It looks something in $100, $120 range. And wow, they over tightened this. They actually broke the little washer here because of how tight it was. So it looks, the quality and the finish looks really nice. But of course you don't get some of the extras. For example, the nicer cases, like my Define R5 I built my Hackintosh with, that has these thumb screws that stay in. So you don't need to take them all the way out, so no chance of losing them or anything like that. But overall, I'm liking this case. I'm going to go ahead and take out a little accessory packet and leave all the wiring back here and set this aside. Next, we're going to start working with the motherboard. So we're going to start out with the motherboard. Now, I have some things set up here. I have our SSD. This is a little screw that's going to hold the SSD in place. CPU still in the case, the RAM sticks, and I have a thin screwdriver with a small Phillips bit in it. And that's what we're going to use to assemble most of the computer. Now, before you touch any of these components, you want to touch something that's grounded or use a special grounding strap. I'll have a link to one of those in the video description. I usually don't use it. I touch a metal object that's grounded, and I've never had any issues. I've been building systems for a very long time, more than half my life. But I like to set up the motherboards on the box itself. That way there's some flex if you're going to push down on it, but it's also fairly sturdy, and I think it's the least risk of bending or damaging any of the components. So we're going to put in the RAM last. So I think we're going to start with this PCI SSD. Now there's different lengths. And we're going to put this one in. I'm going to slide it in here. So it's very easy. You just literally just pop it in and then bend it down. So as you see here, we have one little screw hole here. We have one there. We're going to lift up and pull out, and one there. So this one's going to use, I believe, the medium length. Let's try that again. And we want to have this logo out even though it doesn't look as good. So we're using the second one from this side. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this little baggie. There's one part that you screw in, and there's another little spot where you're going to screw this bolt into. So I'm just going to use my hand, my fingers, and we're going to carefully screw it in. And you don't need to get it too tight. You don't need to use any tools. Just tight enough, it's not going to go anywhere. We're going to insert this a little bit at an angle. It's going to pop in. I'm going to put this on my bit here, and it's really nice to have a magnetic bit. This one is not a magnetic one. They really should use a magnetic one just to make it easier. And then once again, don't make it very tight. It's not going to go anywhere. So just hand tighten it down, and there we go. We have that inserted. Now I'm going to insert the CPU. So you guys see this little bar? Literally, you push it up or towards the bottom of the motherboard, lift it up, and it moves this whole base across. So we're going to open this up, and there's little pins on the CPU. You want to really be really careful not to bend any of them. As you guys see, there's a triangle right here in this corner. We have 3 dark corners and one with a gold triangle. The triangle is going to line up with the little triangle that's on the motherboard right here. And you can also tell, it's kind of hard to see the triangle here, but if you look at the pins, each corner, it's flat, it makes a line. But the one of the triangle, it's different from the others. And then if you look at the little CPU pins, here, the little holes, this one's a little bit different. So just like when you were a kid, you got to match up the peg with the hole wherever it needs to go. So you think it's kind of weird because the logo's sideways, but we're just gonna drop it in. And you don't want to be touching this top. You don't want to be introducing oils or anything like that, because we're going to put a CPU thermal compound. So just push that bar, and there you go. The CPU is inserted. Now before I'm going to install the RAM, I'm going to install my CPU cooler mounting. So we're going to have to remove these 2 mounting brackets here and install the one that comes with our Noctua cooler. Now depending on the cooler you have, it might be different. If you're going to use the recommended bang for the buck cooler, the one that comes with the Ryzen CPU for $20 more, it's going to be a lot easier. You're just going to use these stock ones and it's going to clamp on. This is going to be a little extra steps and a little bit more difficult because this cooler just requires different mounting brackets since they didn't redesign their whole cooler, they just redesigned the mount. So that's going to require us to unscrew these 4 screws here and replace it with the ones that they provide. There's also some things on the back of the motherboard. We're not going to have to touch those. And if you're going to go with like a third-party cooler, something that may be like water cooling or something else, just follow the instructions that they include in their box. Typically, they have good instructions. So if you're using the same Noctua I am, in this pack there's 2 different bars. There's 2 shorter ones and 2 longer ones. We're going to use the shorter ones because we want our fans mounted this way. We want to push the airflow towards the back of the case and then for it to come out. If you want to flip it up and have airflow from the bottom up, let's say you're using a different case than I am, or you just prefer that airflow method, you'll use the longer ones. I'm going to be using the shorter ones, and then there's some spacers and some screws, so it's fairly simple to do. So if you're following based on the instructions as well, which I would suggest for you to read along with this video, we want this little bend to be closer to the CPU. So where we have this mounting point for the CPU cooler, we want this closer. So let me put the other one in, you'll be able to see the correct orientation. So you always want to hand tighten this stuff first. Just get it started, and not just start using your screwdriver right away, just to make sure that it's threaded properly so you don't mess up any of the threads. So as you guys can see, since this is a kind of a rounded shape, we want the 2 pins to be closer than the CPU instead of further away. Now once again, I'm going to just hand tighten these, and we do not want to over tighten them. We don't want it to be too loose or too tight. So as you can see, I'm not applying too much force, but just right when it stops with no force, just slightly further than that. Now the next thing that I want to show you is the actual cooler itself. So it comes this way with this fan mounted in the middle. Now in order to connect this to the motherboard to mount it, we're going to have to take this fan off. Now this has a little plastic protection on it where it's going to make contact with the CPU. We're going to leave that on for now. And the way this fan mounts is you have this little plastic clip here. You can just pull up on it, and it literally unhooks it. So this little piece of metal, it holds down into the holes where you usually put screws on fans, and you tighten it up, and then it clips to these notches on the actual CPU heatsink. So a very simple design. Now we also have this additional fan, and this fan, I'm going to move this over for a second. This fan can be mounted wherever you'd like. So some setups you would mount it, let's see, like this here. So this is like a push setup. So the fans are spinning and pushing, sucking in the air from here, pushing it that way. Now if we mount it this way here, what's going to end up happening is we're going to be blocking these ports for our RAM sticks. We don't want to be blocking those ports. So what we're going to do is we're going to be setting up this fan on the opposite side instead. We're going to set it up this configuration right here. Now this fan in the middle is going to have to be flipped, and we're going to be doing a pull. So we're going to mount this on this side, and it's going to be sucking air through here, so this one's going to be reversed, and this is going to be mounted here. It's also going to be sucking air through. So we're going to be doing a pull setup instead. So we're not going to be blocking our RAM slots. That way, in the future, you can access all of them. Now we may be able to fit 1, maybe 2 if we were to do a standard push setup, but we don't want to risk blocking it. So we're going to make sure that in the future we can use 64 gigs RAM or all 4 slots. So what I'm going to do, and we're not going to mount this yet because we're going to do that after the motherboard is installed, or else it's going to be a pain to access the top holes on the motherboard. But I'm just going to unclip this. Just pull up on these tabs. This thing pulls out, and we're going to reverse these. So you just pull them out. We're going to flip them backwards. And they're really flimsy, so there we go. We reverse that one. We're going to do the same here. And keep in mind, if you're going to use my suggested CPU cooler, which is the stock AMD cooler, you won't have to deal with any of this stuff. It's going to be much more simple. You're not going to have to worry about blocking any ports, reversing anything, mounting issues, nothing like that. And stock CPU coolers used to suck, and the Intel ones still aren't great, but AMD really decided to make sure that their stock coolers are much better and they're actually capable of cooling down their processors properly without having them run hot all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mount this guy in the front here, but I'm not going to put in the one in the middle because we're still going to need that one to be out. So easiest way, I'm going to set it down like this and kind of see how low I want it to be. Kind of center this. There we go. And it's not too difficult to adjust it later if we're going to be too close to something on the motherboard. So fairly simple. We have that done, so we're just going to go ahead and set this aside. Now the next thing I'm going to do is install the RAM sticks. Now the way they work is if you look on the motherboard, you're going to have a little pin here in the center, and it's slightly offset. It looks like it's almost in the center, but there's not a really, you can't put it in the wrong way, the actual RAM stick itself. And here it's kind of color coded, so you see black, gray, black, gray. That means if you're installing just 2 sticks, you want to offset them. You don't want to put them next to each other or off. You want to use the first and the third slot, or the second and the fourth. We're going to use the first and the third. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up this top. These bottom ones, some motherboards, the bottom ones will open up too. These are static, but we're going to open up the tops. We're going to grab our sticks and just drop them in, and make sure your pin, your little cutout here, lines up properly. And you just want to press down. It might seem like you have to press kind of hard, but you're going to hear it just click in and it fit properly. So first one and second one, that goes into the third slot. Now these RAM sticks, they're not too tall, but they are on the taller side. The ones I prefer and I usually buy are the low profile ones. They're just as fast, they're just designed to be shorter. In that case, you're not going to have any issues with coolers like we have a slight issue with this one. There's some that are taller that are even more of a pain. I like the low profile ones. They were just a little bit on the expensive side this time around when doing this build. So RAM prices fluctuate, different brands do different sales. So I'd buy something that's less expensive, and most of these RAM sticks you don't have any issues with. They have lifetime warranties. Now one thing I did notice is the CPU cooler here, I'm going to set it down. When you add the other fan, I can get it to clear to do a push setup instead of a pull setup if I just have it slightly higher than you normally would want it to be. So what I'm going to do is this one gets installed afterwards. So if there's enough clearance on the side panel to have these fans slightly higher, then I'm going to set it up. I'm going to flip this back around in the center, and then this guy I'm going to put up on this side. So the fans are going to be pulling air from here and then pushing it through instead of having it pull air through instead. That's the way I like to set it up. So we're going to see if it fits. If it doesn't fit and the side panel touches this or it's too close, I'll do a pull setup allowing me to have the fans lower, but if not, I'll do a push setup. Now they're not high enough to where air is being lost. If you look where the airflow comes out, it's still going to go through the fins properly. If you have a low profile RAM, then none of this will matter. You'll just do the way it was originally configured. So we'll see how that is, but it's not too hard to flip these fans, so you can set it up whichever way works best. And of course, if you're using my suggested cooler, which is the stock one, you won't have to worry about this at all. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install this motherboard into the case. Now there's going to be a couple things we're going to need to do, but the main point of it is to set this in, and we have different cutouts here with holes. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now these are going to line up with the little risers inside of the case. So little bolts, that's the little metal spacers that stick up and then have threaded little threads to screw in those screws. So I'm going to scoot this over to the side. I'm going to grab my case, and as you guys see here, we have a number of these risers. The center one, you don't screw anything in, it's just the main one so that you can lay the board down and get it lined up properly. And we have quite a bit here. So there's 3 up top, these 3, including the center one that you don't screw in the middle, and then 3 at the bottom. Depending on the motherboard, you're going to use a variety of these. If you're not going to use one, let's see, so this case doesn't let you unscrew them. Some of them will actually let you unscrew the little risers. So I'm going to set this down. Inside the case, there's going to be a little box on the other side that's going to have all your screws and everything you need. Now before we put the motherboard in, we have to get this little I/O plate. Now this one looks pretty cheap because it's a lower end motherboard. Some of them look nicer with labels and stuff, but they all work the same way. It's a metallic plate, some have plastic coatings on it, and on the edges you got to be careful not to get cut, but the metal is bent, so it kind of holds itself in place in this slot. So first off, you want to just make sure you're putting it the right way. Typically you have the mouse up top, and then you have the little sound card or speakers or headphones and mic jack here at the bottom. Now the way you put this in is you're going to put it inside the case and push on all four corners, and it just pops into place. So definitely be careful not to cut yourself. There are some sharp edges here, but we're going to take our time and pop it in. Now these are usually a pain. We'll see how this one is. So as you see, I'm just going around pushing up top, then at the bottom, and just being careful with it. So there you go. It's popped in, and then on the back of the motherboard, all your inputs and outputs, which is your I/O, is going to slide in here. So we're going to drop the motherboard in at an angle, and then push it towards this back plate and make sure everything lines up properly, and then it's going to see inside the middle on that little riser. Now inside this case, where the power supply cover is on the other side, you have this box with labeled the brand. Inside there is all your hardware. So there's 3 separate sets of screws. We're going to use the smallest ones, and they're the ones with the small thread and the flat top. This is what holds the motherboard in. The larger ones, slightly larger, are for drives and different stuff like that. And the largest ones that are much thicker, much coarser threads are what's going to hold the power supply in. So there's only 4 of the largest ones. And these ones are labeled M3 flat. So if you're following user manuals, they're going to tell you what it is. So M3 flat is what we're using for the motherboard. So once again, you want to make sure you touch something that's grounded before touching your power supply or before touching your motherboard. And it looks like it's a tight fit with this case because this is on a smaller side. So I carefully inserted it. Now before laying it flat, I'm going to push it towards this I/O panel. And you want to make sure that you align it. So I can visibly see here where the holes are and where the I/O is aligning to the plate. And you just want to take your time. And then here we're seeing the little plug that's going to hold the motherboard in place. So pressed it down. Everything looks lined up. Our I/O on the back lined up and pushed through. And there you go. So now we're set here. Once again, there's 2 bolts at the bottom, 2 here in the center, and then 2 at the top. And what's nice about this case is it's nice and large and open. This case isn't designed to hold a ton of drives. There are some drives that you can put in here, but it's pretty free over here and over here, which makes it really nice and easy to work on. So I'm going to get my bit here, and it's nice. Once again, if you don't have any screwdrivers or anything like that, buy some that are magnetic. It's going to make your job easier. So we're only going to need 6 of these. I'm going to be careful not to drop these, but if I do, there's lots of holes so you can kind of shake it out. I'm going to start off with the bottom, which you guys probably can't see. And just like with everything else we've been doing, you want to take it easy and not tighten anything down too tight. Just tighten it down until it kind of stops at a very low pressure, not very much torque, and then just tighten it slightly more than that. And the last one. Okay. So next we're going to go ahead and install our power supply. Now I flipped the case up, and inside the power supply we have a little pack like this with 4 screws that are silver, and then this is to test if the power supply works, just in case you want to test it without a motherboard. I'm not going to use this because the case came with 4 power supply screws that are black, and it's going to match much better than the silver ones. Now this power supply comes with these cables, which are the main cables and wires that you need for your motherboard setup. So it's not fully modular, but either way, if you're building a computer, you're going to need these ones here. As you guys see, we have all these other plugs, so we can put in the right cables that we need for the parts that we have. So this case has a little cover on the side to hide your power supply, and it just makes it look a little bit cleaner. Now, it also, the way it's designed is it's designed to suck in air from the bottom, so we're going to want to position this fan towards the bottom this way right here. Some cases are designed to suck in from the top, but this one has a nice filter here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take this cable management off, It's going to make it easier. Now this case allows you to unscrew this and then pull this back plate off, tighten it up, put it on, and slide it in. Okay, so these ones are actually staying in here. So that's nice. Maybe all of the screws are designed to stay inside, even the side ones, but they really weren't. So gonna keep in mind the orientation of the power supply and this little mounting bracket. Gonna take out these 4 screws. And we're gonna mount it up. So there's really only kind of one way to do it. You can't mess it up or do it the wrong way. So we're going to get all of them inserted, and then at the very end we can tighten them down. So okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and insert these cables first. Pull them through the back. Insert our power supply. Now line up these screws, and they're thumb screws, so that makes it easier. And you don't want to just get it as tight as they had it out of the box. I'm not sure why they tighten these things down like crazy, but we're not going to do that. It's not really needed. Now we're going to start with our cable routing. The power supply has 3 cables that are included that are just connected that you can't unplug. One is this 24 pin. This is a main power lead that powers the CPU and the motherboard, and this is the secondary one. This one has 2 tips on it. We're only going to use one. Some of the really higher end motherboards will need 2 of them. We're just going to use this top one. And then this one right here, which is a 6+2, is for the graphics card. So if your graphics card only uses one connection like this, you're not going to have to add in an additional one to the back of the power supply, which we are not going to have to do. This is a more minimalistic build, so I don't think we're going to need to add any other cables. If you're going to use a second graphics card, you're going to have to use a second cable, which is included. There's a lot of cables inside the power supply box, but we will not be needing them. So this big one right here, the 24 pin, is this guy right here. So we're going to route this cable behind up here, and it's just going to fold right over. We want to really keep our cables clean so they're not blocking any airflow or getting in the way. This one right here, the CPU, is right up here in the corner, and back here through the case there's a cutout. So we're going to push it through the cutout and then bend it and plug it in. And this motherboard actually uses an 8-pin, so we actually are going to be using both of these. So I'm guessing AMD is a little bit different. I haven't done an AMD build in a long time, but as you guys can see, if you just push them together, it is 8 pins. That's what we're going to plug up here. And then the graphics card, we're also going to route from back here and then plug into the graphics card. So I'm going to go ahead and spin this around for you guys. So as you guys see, there's already these cables that are pre-routed, and they're mounted using zip ties to different points that we have here for cable management, which is really nice. I'm going to start out here by just pushing this through the top where we're going to mount it. And then afterwards we'll pull them down, and we'll put a couple zip ties where we need them to keep the cables flat and out of the way so the side panel can close. And this one we're going to push through here. Now a little bit higher for now. And this big one is also going to be pushed through right there. So you can just push these cables through. So one nice thing about this power supply is that it is modular. We don't need to be plugging a bunch of stuff in, so our cable management is going to be much easier. If you got a power supply that's about $10, $15, $20 cheaper, you're going to have double or triple the cables coming out. And when you don't need them, it's just going to be much more of a pain. This case is nice because it has the little sheet of metal in the front that blocks it. If not, you'd see just a whole ton of ugly cables. And these are sleeved as well, which makes it look nicer, cleaner, instead of just having all those multicolored cables. So let's go ahead and... Now the image is quite blown out here because I want you guys to see this little pin up here, which is hard to see without turning up the camera exposure. Now on one side there's a little clip which is going to clip on this little clip is going to clip on there. So now I'm going to do it this way just so it's easier for you guys to see, but you can just lay the case on the desk. It's going to make it easier for you. So I'm going to try to plug in the first one. Instead of trying to do it together, I'm going to try to do it one at a time. There we go, we plugged it in. There's this cable. It's a little bit ugly. I'm just going to push it back, but that way we have some nice, cleaner cabling. Now we're going to work on the 24-pin connection. Same thing here. We have a little clip on this back, on this side, and a little clip right here. So make sure there's no extra twists in the cable. And this one's easier. Just pop it in. There's going to be some flex on the motherboard, but as long as you're not forcing it, it's not going to be too bad. There we go, we're connected. Unfortunately, we do see all these different colors, so it's not as nice looking, but I don't want to spend another $30 on this build just to make it look nicer. If you're going to spend some more money on a higher end power supply, it's going to be sleeved all the way, or these cables are going to be all one color. So it's going to make it look a little bit cleaner. Now this case does come with a bunch of different little cables that power various things, such as you have the little LED light, the switch, fans. So we're going to undo this bunch here, and we're going to take a look at that. So there's a way to use a Molex connector to power the two fans. So the case comes with a back fan and a top fan. It does not come with any fans in the front, which we're not going to be adding. And if the computer is going to get too hot or too warm, then we may add some more fans, but we most likely won't need it. Now I don't want to be using this type of a connector because I don't want to run another power supply output. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug this here and up top, and I'm going to get rid of this guy right here. So the benefit is, and I don't know if we'll have to probably cut off the zip tie to pull it out, but the benefit of just using this little 3-pin connector is that we're going to just power it off the motherboard, and depending on the software and the motherboard, you're going to be able to actually control it through the motherboard, the speed of it. So we're going to pull this guy out later. So the other cables here, we have these guys right here. So this is the power supply switch, the LEDs for the switch, and the hard drive LED. So if you're getting activity, it's going to flash. So you don't have to plug in the hard drive LED or the LEDs for the power switch, but of course you do need to have the power switch working. And here we have HD audio, which is your microphone jack and your speaker or headphone jack that's at the top of the case. And then this guy right here is for the USB 3.0 ports. So depending on where this needs to plug in, we're gonna route it in a different area. So for example, for the HD audio, we're gonna wanna route it, let's see if there's a cutout, right here, and that's gonna get closest to us. The power supply or the actual power switch and the LED, we're gonna route through here because that's where it's located. And then this USB header, we're gonna push through. Let's find where the USB plugs in on this motherboard. Okay, so the USB also plugs in somewhere right around here. So let's go ahead and we're gonna start with the USB. So depending on your motherboard, you just wanna place it wherever makes the most sense. So push it through here, and leave it like that. And then our power LEDs. So this set, push it up here, and then our HD audio. Our HD audio is, like I said, right there on this side. I'm gonna pull that through there. And then our fans, we're gonna route through, one's gonna be from the top, and then one's gonna be also from the top, but on this side. So since they're tied down to these zip ties, I'm gonna have to cut these. You wanna be very careful and kind of cut away from the cables if you can insert it to minimize risk of cutting one of these cables and having to solder and deal with that type of stuff. And there's a lot of extra zip ties included. So this guy right here, I'm gonna get out of my way. This one I'm gonna push through here, leave it hanging. And this one's very long. I'm gonna push through this slot, the same slot basically that the fans came out of. I'm gonna pull it back through. Now we're able to spin the case around, and we're gonna plug everything in. All right, so now we're ready to plug some of this stuff in. Now, for your LEDs and your power switch, it's gonna go down here, and if you can follow the manual with the motherboard to see exactly where it is, but there's also some labels. It's gonna be hard to show off, but they're very, very small, and it shows you where your hard drive LED is, your reset, your power switch, and the LEDs. This guy right here is a lot easier. It plugs right into here. You can't really mess it up or plug it in the wrong way because of a notch that's up here. But the cable might be a little difficult because it's fairly thick on this case, and the motherboard sits really low. So I fold the cable underneath itself and push it through. So that guy's connected, it's nice and clean. Now our HD audio is gonna plug in at the bottom here at the very left side. You'll notice there's one pin missing, and there's also one pin missing on the motherboard. So once again, we're gonna flip this back this way. So we have the least visible cables, and hard to show on video, but it plugs in, and you just carefully push it in. So you have to apply a little bit of force, but as you see, we have it connected there, and the wire is just going back through that slot at the bottom. Now I'm gonna do the best job showing you guys how to do this connection here. You should be able to have a decent visual aid, but it is very small, so keep that in mind. You guys can go off of it, but there's a pretty good guide on what everything is. And then these little pins here, they'll typically, if it doesn't matter, you can stick it in whichever way. If it does matter, it's going to have a positive and a negative. So we have power LED plus, power LED minus. So the minus here, we have in this bottom very right pin is the power LED minus. I'm going to plug that in there. Plus is the next one over. We're going to plug that in there, and I realize I'm blocking every time. But you guys see there, so those two are connected. Now we have our power switch. So it looks like the power switch is right here in the middle at the top. It's hard to tell, really hard to tell with this motherboard, but we will see if the power switch doesn't work. We'll take a closer look and try something else. So far we have the bottom very right one and the next one over, and the top we skipped 4 pins and then plugged in the power switch, but that could be wrong. Last thing is the hard drive LED, which this one looks to be a little bit more simple, and it's going to be below the power switch and over. And these could be a pain to plug in. You just got to take your time and be patient with it. So hopefully visually that helps a little bit, but those are always kind of tricky, and you got to kind of play with them. So all of those are plugged in. Now we're going to plug in our fans. So as far as the fans, we have a few different options. This cable we have coming through here from the top for this rear fan is going to plug in right here. So it's labeled fan RGB header. We don't have, this is not an RGB fan, so there's no colors with LEDs embedded that you can adjust. And there's 4 pins here, but the actual fan only has 3. But thankfully, the way they designed it, these notches in this connector will line up perfectly with the little clip here, so you can't really insert it wrong. So we're gonna line it up, notches, and it should just pop right in there. All right, the clip is sticking. It didn't go in, but it's lined up properly. I'm going to take this cable and just hide it behind this heatsink here to keep it a little bit neater. And then we're going to use some zip ties on the back. So there's one of them right here. And then the second one we're going to use And this motherboard doesn't have a lot of fan headers because it is a less expensive one. We're going to use at the top, I'm not sure if you see it, but right on the left hand side of the RAM, we have a white one which is labeled CPU fan, and right above that we have a black one. So we're going to plug in this top fan, same exact way, into that top header. So if you're going to add more fans, you're going to have to take some power out of the power supply itself to power them. So there we go. All of our wiring is completed and plugged in now. We're not going to have to take extra wires out of here for SSDs or hard drives, at least not my build. If you're going to use extra hard drives, then you will plug in an extra cable into the power supply, which is really self-explanatory. It's just accessory cable, and then plug your SATA cable from the motherboard into this plug, which the motherboard comes with it, and that plugs into the back of the hard drive. But all my stuff is on external drives, so this is how I'm setting up this system here. Now it's time for us to put the CPU cooler into here and connect it. So what we're going to want to do is take the box that came with our CPU cooler, and inside of there we have some accessories, one of it which is thermal paste. The thermal paste is going to go right on top of the CPU, and hopefully you haven't touched it yet, because if you did, you're going to have some grease or fingerprints or something on there. If you touched it, you're going to want to get like a swab and then like a cotton ball with some alcohol, clean it off, wipe it off carefully, and let it dry. But along with that, we have some of these splitters here. Now what these do is they're going to take the CPU header and they're going to split it. One is a low noise adapter. So these guys will go in line if you want it to be quieter, but if it's going to be quieter, the temps are going to be hotter. So we're not going to use these just yet. We're just going to use this one splitter for now, and later if the CPU is running really cool and we don't mind it running a little bit hotter, if there's enough kind of a threshold there, then we can put in those splitters. So this guy is going to plug in just like we did with the previous ones, except this is a 4-pin connector. It's going to plug in right there, and then we're going to get that out of the way. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take this fan, I'm going to take it off because I'm going to be mounting it back here in the center, since we know we have enough room to clear the RAM here. And I'm going to take these clips, reverse them, so that way I can mount it here, and the other fan is going to be mounted on this side. I'm not going to mount the fans just yet because I want to make it easier for myself. Now this cooler here, it's going to be hard to see, but it uses some screws with some springs inside of there. So you're going to line it up to these mounting points, and you're just going to use the screwdriver that they include. Once it's aligned, that should pop into here, and you can tighten this down. It's going to give perfect tension to hold it. And then afterwards, we can connect our fans back where we need them to be, and then plug in these cables. So it might be a little bit tight depending how it goes. I might actually take this off and then connect the cables first, but it looks like there's going to be enough room up here up top to play and be able to adjust this. So we're going to grab our thermal compound, which is this right here, unscrew the tip, and we're going to put a little pea-sized amount right at the center. Right about there. Maybe a little bit more on this side. You don't want to add too much, because then it's going to come out on the sides, and it's not going to work as well. This is really just supposed to fill in fine little scratches or holes, stuff like that. So we have that connected. Now I'm going to pop this off, and don't touch the bottom there, and set it down as best as you can on top. I'm not going to try to force it. I'm going to let it just sit there, and then using the included screwdriver, I'm going to start carefully, slowly just threading it, and hopefully just getting it started. So each different CPU is going to have a different method, CPU cooler. And then if you are using something that supports stock mounting brackets, that's going to be even easier. All right, so I feel that side going on. See if we can get this side going. Looks like you might have to apply a little bit of pressure first before it starts screwing down. Now we've got it threaded down, and I'm going to just take turns doing 2-3 rotations on one side and 2-3 rotations on the other side. That way we're not just spreading the thermal compound, pressing down to one side, having it all be squeezed out. Just being a little bit more careful with it. So that side is already all the way done. This side, there you go. So you can't mess it up really. As soon as you feel pressure, it stops. You go slightly more than that. But the way they designed the spring system, it's almost foolproof there. So let's see if we can get the side panels to clear. And yes, we can. At least it looks like we can. So as you see there, we did get the side panel on. It barely clears the top of the CPU cooler. It heats the little heat pipes that come through. Just barely. Might be by 1 millimeter. Yeah, 1 or 2 millimeters is what it clears by. But unfortunately, it doesn't clear these, I'm assuming. If I connect this, even at the very lowest that I can get these to sit, the side panel will not attach here. It sticks up too high, past the top, about 1 inch too high. So, even though these are really nice fans, I may not be able to use them. Maybe if I try using a different slot, possibly, for the RAM. But still, I don't think that I'll be able to clear the cooler. So let's just attempt this here. You guys can see what kind of things you can try if you come up to a similar situation. Worst case scenario is I could possibly get some different fans, or try buying one of those stock coolers from AMD if they'll have it on the market by themselves. That's the hard thing about buying something right when it comes out. So you don't have all the availability for parts and accessories and all that stuff. So we're going to attempt this with the RAM in the second and fourth slot. Okay. That did get it lower, but not low enough. And let's see if we can get this working if we have this in a different layout. So looks like we can probably get this guy low enough, just low enough in here, not on this side. And let's check out the other fan. If we do it this way, we'll have to do a pull setup like I had initially talked about. So we can get this low enough as well. Problem is it doesn't look as good. I don't know about performance, cooling performance, but optimally you want one fan here pushing, this one pulling air through, pushing through here, and this one we have pulling the hot air that's coming out and back this way. So I think that would be the optimal setup, but the fans are too big. So I think I'm going to set it up as a pull setup That's probably what I'm going to do just so I can close that side panel. And now we're just going to connect these cables right here. Our little Y splitter to the fans. I'm going to tuck these right underneath this top fan here, but you want to make sure you tuck them in well. There you go. That way they're not going to get stuck in here and the fan's not going to shred the cable. So next we're going to be installing our graphics card. So here we have the RX 480. If you have a 1070 or a different card, it's going to be very similar. You're just going to have a different power connector here possibly. This is a 6-pin, which is just using this smaller portion. If it's an 8-pin, both these just sit together and plug in. Or if you have a double, you'll have to put in another power cable to the power supply. So before we install that, we need to remove one of these little slots. What we're going to want to do is figure out which one we need to take off. So the graphics card, it can go into either one of these slots. It can either go lower or it can go higher, but you want to put it in one of these that have this little clip that closes. Now, let me see, I'm trying to figure out which one I rather use. So even though both of these slots are PCI 16X rated, if you're going to have two graphics cards, they do suggest using the top one. They says for better performance. I don't know how it makes sense that it would be better performance if they're both 16X, but they suggest using the top slot. So that's what we're going to do. So you just unscrew these, pop out these two little covers on your graphics card. Take this little rubber, hard plastic, or hard rubber protector off. I'm going to take this thing off. So some little quirks with this case. Like I said, I've never built with this case before. Each case has its own quirks. The higher end cases have less quirks, or the larger ones are sometimes a little bit easier. This one's not been bad at all overall, but one of the quirks is we have to take that top panel off. I think that's just because they designed this case to be as small as possible while still holding full-size components. So all you do is press down evenly. I kind of wiggled it side to side. It'll pop in and you may or may not hear a click, but that little clamp that we opened up, it's going to lock back in. So we have this set up and we're going to put these thumb screws back in here. Now it doesn't look like it's aligned perfectly well. I'm going to have to apply a little bit of force over here. Looks like this, when they cut this out, it was bent out just a little bit too much. So in order for me to screw down this thumb screw, I have to slightly push on this panel to bend it closer, but that should not be a problem. As long as you can get these in, there you go, and screw them down. Okay. Now that we have the graphics card in, we're going to plug it in with this power connector that's built into the power supply. For this graphics card, we don't need these extra 2 pins. We're only going to use these. So I'm going to tuck this back. And what I'm going to do for the cleanest build is I'm going to run this cable, and you guys won't be able to see it, but right underneath this graphics card, before you have the slot that it plugs into. And then I'm going to tuck the cable through here. So I don't want to route it up through here and plug in. It's going to look ugly. So I just want the cleanest kind of look. So I'm going to pull there, tuck this little pin behind, and I'm going to plug it in here. There we go. And kind of pull back over here to get some of the extra out. And there we are. So we have a nice clean look. Just this cable coming out from here, nothing sticking out and around. So there we go. You guys see how clean this system looks. As far as wiring, everything is channeled through different areas of the case. That way it's clean. We don't have things obstructing airflow or having a risk of getting sucked into one of the fans or anything like that. Now is the last step, is really just tidying up some of this wiring. And inside of your case with the accessories, we have all these little zip ties. And there's different mounting points here. So you see all these little notches that are sticking out. And that's where you can take some of this wiring and then zip tie it. That way it's flat, so you can put the side panel on and it stays cleaner. And so you just want to take a decent amount of time, figure out what sits which way. Like for example, this I can wire here and here with 2 zip ties, and what stuff should be zip tied all together as a bunch. For example, right here we're going to zip tie all this stuff and just get a nice clean looking setup. It doesn't have to be perfect because the side panel is closed, but you do want to make sure that the side panel does actually close. Some of the stuff could be tucked in at the bottom here without extra zip ties. Something like this big cable, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to shove it right inside of there. I'm not going to zip tie it. This is pretty stiff right here, and I don't really need to zip tie it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to leave it how it is. It's not sticking out or blocking anything. Plus, I'm going to be testing out some different graphics cards and doing some tests. So I'm not going to get everything perfect, because then I'm going to have to be cutting these zip ties to adjust some of these cables and pull some of them out. But I will do the main ones. But for your build, since you're not going to be changing everything, you can just take your time, get everything nice and neat and clean, and then that way it looks nice, everything's out of the way, and it's set up properly. Once you have everything adjusted how you like it, you can go ahead and put your side panel back on. I'm going to set this thing down. There we go. Don't have any gaps here anywhere. And everything's set up. So with all this stuff, you just want to be a little bit patient and not try to just force everything in. If it's not closing, open it back up, take a look, see what's not flush and what you might have to adjust or zip tie somewhere else. But should be pretty easy to do with a little bit of patience. All right, guys, so we're done with the actual build itself. Hopefully that helped you guys out. Of course, if your parts are a little bit different, you may have some additional steps, or you might have to do something a little bit differently. But for the most part, I try to do my best to explain everything that's important when you're building, and how to connect everything, how to route wires, what steps to do things in. So if it's your first time building, I think it should be a very good resource to help you out. Now, I'm not going to put my side panel on. If you want to at this point, you can put this side panel on and close it off as well. Now you want to get your monitor, your keyboard, your mouse, and your Windows installation, and we're going to go ahead and do the software side. So now you need to get your Windows 10 USB or disk. Of course, if you have a disk, you're going to have to use a disk drive. I don't have a USB. Like if you buy Windows 10, it can come on a USB. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one, which Microsoft allows you to do really easily. So you're going to need a USB that is at least 4 gigs in size. Mine is a 16 gig. And then do a Google search for Windows 10 USB tool. And we're going to go to the top option. And we're going to download the Windows 10 USB tool. Now you're going to have to be on a Windows here, so that's why I'm at my house right now using a Windows computer. Yes. So it's very nice to make it easy. This way, if you have a serial code for Windows 10 from a different computer or a previous build, you can use it like I'm going to do. Or if you just want to buy one online for like a lower price on like cdkey.com or one of the other sites that are legitimate but give you a better price, then you could do it that way. So we're going to do English, Windows 10, 64, but you want to make sure you're doing 64-bit. Hit next, USB flash drive. So now you want to get your flash drive out. This is the one I'm using. And insert it into your computer. Okay, flash drive is inserted. And don't select any external hard drives if you have them connected. You don't want it to get formatted. We're going to select the USB here. Hit next. And now it's going to go ahead and download Windows. So it's less than 4 gigs, between 3 and 4 gigs in size. If you have fast internet, it's going to go pretty quick, like you guys see here. If you have slower internet, it might take a while, but like it says, you can keep using your computer while it downloads. Alright, now we're done. Windows 10 says that the USB flash drive is ready. Just going to hit finish. And there we go. Now you can eject your flash drive, and we're going to plug it into our new build to install Windows. Alright guys, so we're all set up here to start doing the software installation. I have the Windows USB that I created earlier. If you have one that ships with your Windows, or you're using a disk with a disk drive, you can use that as well. But I prefer getting the newest, latest Windows off of the website. So I'm going to go ahead and, before I plug it in, I'm going to turn on the system. We're going to make sure everything is working properly. So everything was plugged in, the power switch was plugged in correctly, and we're seeing it turn on. If it doesn't turn on, I would suggest looking over the pins where you plugged in your power switch and making sure those are correct. Alright, so it's reading our monitor. Press delete or F2 to enter BIOS. I'm just going to leave that on. Let's see what happens. But we're getting a signal from the graphics card. The fans are spinning. So it looks like everything's working properly. And let's take a look here. What do we have? So on the right hand side we see our SSD. It's letting us know we have 262 gigs after it's formatted, or for actual free usable space. CPU temperature, you want to take a look here. You want to be probably under 45. Right now we're at 37. And what this means is it's operating normally, and the CPU heatsink is seated correctly. If for some reason you didn't install it properly, or you forgot your thermal paste, or you have some issue, this is going to be warmer, maybe 50, 60 degrees, or maybe even higher. But somewhere in the 45 or lower is normal, so we're at 37. Here on the left side, we see we have the AMD Ryzen 1700X 8-core processor. That means the processor is working correctly and it's plugged in, there's no issues. And our RAM, we're showing 32,768, so 32 gigs of RAM. We see where the RAM is plugged in. We have nothing in the SATA ports because I use the M.2 SSD, which is showing up here. And right here at the bottom are fans. So we're showing 3 fans. We have 2 that are case fans. And then we also have one which is CPU fan. You see it's running quite slow. And the CPU fan, we used a splitter. So we actually have 2 CPU fans, but we use that splitter. So it just shows up and it's controlled as one. So everything is looking great. So what I'm going to do is let's hit save and exit. We're not changing anything. And I'm going to plug in my USB into the back in one of the ports. So you may have to restart it one more time once you save and exit, because if it started the boot up process too quick, maybe it'll get past the booting stage. But we'll see what happens right now. So there you go. So I had enough time there. And it could figure out and start reading from the USB drive right away, or you might have to go into the BIOS to show what it should boot off of. So we'll see what happens. There you go. It picked that up since we don't have anything installed, and we're seeing the Windows logo here. At this point, it should be pretty easy. Windows is really easy to install. It does take a little bit of time. It is quicker off of a USB drive, than off of a disk or anything, and it's very, very simple to go through. So the languages, everything's standard. I'm going to hit install. Okay, so here's where you want to put in your product key. Now, if you don't have one or you want to do it later, you actually aren't forced to do it right away. But if you bought a version of Windows with a USB, you'll have one there, or if you have a previous build that you're replacing with this one, you can reuse it as long as you're not using it on the other computer. I'm going to hit I don't have a product key, and it should still go through, and I'll be able to enter that later. Now, here you select which one. I'm just going to go with home. Accept terms, and custom install. So we're not upgrading from like Windows 7 or 8 to 10, we're doing a custom install. Here's where you have to select your SSD. Now, if you have multiple hard drives, you're going to have multiple ones come up, and you want to make sure you select the one that is your M.2. Now, if you have 2 or 3 SSDs you want to use that are the same size, you just have to select one of them. And usually when I do a fresh setup, I like just having one drive plugged in. That way you can't mess anything up. And then once Windows is installed, you can plug in the other drives and format them in Windows. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this, and over here we're going to hit new, because it does have to format the drive to be able to install Windows on it. I'm going to select the full size. I don't want to split the hard drive in multiple areas, anything like that. So I'm going to hit apply, hit OK. It's going to do make different partitions. All right, so as you guys see, now there's 4 partitions. One's a recovery, a couple of really tiny ones that it uses for different things, and then we have the main 255 gig here. We're going to hit next. And now it's basically a waiting game. It's going to go through, install all the files, get everything ready. So at this point, just wait, grab some coffee, a drink, whatever you want, take a break, and get back to it once it's done. All right, so that process went pretty quick for me since I'm going off of a USB, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere in that kind of a range. And it went ahead and restarted by itself. And now we're seeing the Asus logo from the motherboard, and at the bottom we're seeing a getting ready. So it's going to finish up and do the final installations, and then it's going to get to the point where you select your username, password, some preferences, stuff like that. But this is basically the finish to getting the system built. And this is basically like when you buy a new computer from the store. It's exactly what you go through. You turn it on and select the username and your picture and kind of preferences like that. All right, so we're here at the stage where we're going to select our options. You can use express settings or customize it. So if you want to dig in and change different things, speech and the reporting that gets sent to Microsoft, you could do that. Just for the sake of this video, I'm going to select express. Not going to do Cortana yet, but if you have a mic set up, you can set up Cortana, but most of the stuff you could do afterwards. All right, guys, so we're basically done here. We're at Windows, so everything's set up. The last thing that you really want to do and that I suggest doing is making sure Windows Update is set up on automatic. Now, you're going to need internet for that, and if you use the Express setting, it should be set up as automatic, so it'll download everything. And some stuff can get installed, other times they'll ask you to restart the computer, but you want to make sure you have all the latest safety patches and bug fixes, stuff like that. So you can either plug in your Ethernet or you can have like a Wi-Fi USB stick like this. So I'm going to use this right now, and almost all of them with Windows 10 will auto install and work out of the box. If not, you might have to use a disk drive or a USB if it comes with it, or an SD card. Or worst case scenario, use another computer to download the latest driver for it, throw it on a USB like a flash drive, thumb drive, and then plug it in and install it. But I'm going to plug this here. I'm going to plug it in, and so right away it was instantly noticed. And now we have our Wi-Fi. Now, most of the stuff is going to work out of the box. Windows is really, really good with installing your Ethernet and different things for the motherboard, and then it'll do the auto updates and installs. And you guys saw how easy that USB stick work. Now I'm connected to the internet. Now the main thing that you want to make sure you do after you get set up is download the latest drivers for your graphics card. Windows is going to do a basic installation, but if you want to get like full acceleration, CUDA support if you're using an NVIDIA graphics card, and just the best performance, you want to make sure to do this. Now here we did a RX 480 install, so I'm going to go to AMD's website, but if you're using NVIDIA, you basically just want to search for the latest driver. So I'm going to write RX 480 driver. This old keyboard isn't working great. AMD RX 480. And these drivers get updated quite often. So we're going to go over to support and drivers here. And it's a similar step for NVIDIA, but you can literally write in, let's say, GTX 1070 drivers and download the latest one. So it can automatically detect it, but you have to download a little installer. So if you don't know what you have, you could do that. But of course, I know which one I have. So desktop graphics, RX series, and value, Windows 10 64-bit, and display results. And here we go. I'm going to download the whole package. So Radeon software, and this is the latest one. So this was released just 2 days ago, and there was another one 3 weeks ago. So latest one, we're going to download it, and then of course, I'm going to save. All right, guys, so it's downloaded. I'm just going to go ahead and run it, and just simple, just like you would do any installation. We're going to trust it and go through the process. It's going to install. It's probably going to flash a couple times. The screen's going to turn on and off. And then afterwards, we're just going to have to restart it. Just going to use the Express install. So I'm not going to be doing game streaming or anything like that, so I'm going to skip it. But if you are and you want to use that, I'm going to select keep it up to date. I want it to just auto update the drivers, and we're just going to restart. All right, guys, so we're all done with this build. Thank you for joining us and supporting us on Patreon. We definitely appreciate your continued support because it lets us to be able to buy parts like these, do these builds and these videos and everything you see on this channel. So thank you guys so much. We definitely appreciate it. We did this whole complete build step by step. Hopefully that helped you out, especially those that are just starting out. If it's their first build, I know how much it helps having a visual aid and understanding and explanation of how to do certain things and what order to put stuff together in. If you guys have any questions, you guys can ask in the comment section below. I'd love to answer them, or ask on the Patreon page. Send me a message through Patreon. And now we're all set up. We have Windows set up. The auto updates should be enabled, so those are going to download and you're going to restart and install them. Graphically, you're set up. So at this point, you can start enjoying your computer. If you want to add in extra hard drives or internal space, you could do that. And download your Premiere Pro and any other software you use, maybe DaVinci Resolve, and just have a really nice system. And I think this setup is really the best bang for the buck if you're going to do video editing and 3D modeling and design, thanks to that new AMD processor that they released, which is very powerful at about 40% of the price of Intel's 8 cores and just about as powerful. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you for watching, your support, and we'll see you in the next video.